Hi, and welcome again to another video seminar on the wonderful world of antique pump organs. Hi, I'm Rod Fudge with PumpOrganRestorations.com. This is another video seminar in a series that I'm doing on all things pump organ. To start with, I want to talk about what makes the pump organ work. And there's a difference between pump organs in this country and the pump organs over in Europe. Here in the States, the pump organs that were built here operated on a suction principle. In another video, I hope to have some bellows systems here. We can demonstrate exactly how they work. So when you operate the pedals, what you're doing is you're sucking air out of a much larger bellow in the back, and that bellow collapses in. And it is from that large bellow that air is sucked through the reeds, and thus you have the sound. In Europe, totally opposite. It's a pressure system. Now, the pump organs built in Europe were called harmoniums. Here in the States, they're, of course, officially, they're called reed organs. That's what the industry called them because they operated on reeds and suction. The general public said, well, that's nice, but it's really a pump organ. That's what you have to do. So that's where the name pump organ came from. So for those that are interested, I've had some people ask, what is the difference between the European organs? And that's the difference, pressure, suction. So let's go to, this is a good one. Is my pump organ in tune or out of tune? Now, it wasn't until the turn of the century, 1900, just about when the pump organ industry was in a free fall. Everyone got together, piano manufacturers, pump organ manufacturers, and they said, look, let's all come to agreement that everything that we push out the door is going to be tuned to A440. Now, that's the standard today, and it has been since the turn of the century, 1900. Well, prior to that, it was a free-for-all. You could have, say, 3 pump organ manufacturers in Boston, as an example, and one would tune their organs to 440. Another third of those companies would turn it to, say, 452, which was considered orchestral. And then you might have another one at 434. Now, there's really no big news about that, for the exception if you are going to have other people playing along with you, there's going to be a quick problem, and you're going to be the problem. Again, I would say 1 organ in 3 is tuned to 440. The others are not. Now the question's asked, can I have my pump organ retuned, reset, so it is 440? The answer is yes. Yes. Not necessarily the easiest job in the world, which brings me to another point. Let's talk about reeds for a second, and these organs, talking about tuning. Typically, a pump organ will have 61 keys, and you'll have 61 reeds in the front, 61 reeds in the back. Typically, 2 rows, 1 in the back. But there are some pump organs, quite a few of them, that will have 2 rows in the front, 2 rows in the back. When I say in the front, they're inside. You don't see them. And in some cases, you'll have 3 rows in the front and 3 rows in the back. Well, you're getting up to 400 reeds. That's a lot of reeds. Let's just for a second. I know it's not on the list there. A lot of times people will say, well, you know, I've got a pump organ and I've got, you know, notes that won't play. In most cases, there's just a piece of dust that's jammed in there between the tongue and the frame of the brass reed. What you want to do is get in there with a pair of pliers or bent hook, dry cleaning, what do we call those? Right, that's right. And pull that reed out, blow it off, put it back in, 9 times out of 10, that thing's going to work just fine. Now, on the other hand, if you're playing, as soon as you play, you haven't pulled out any stops yet, and that's another thing. Let me pause there. In order for the pump organ to make any sound, while you're pumping, you have to have some of the stops pulled out. The ones other than bass treble and bass coupler, treble coupler, and the Vauxhall mono. Those 3 don't make noise. But all the others, if you pull them out, they'll make sound for you. So if you're pumping and there's no sound, be sure you've got a couple of those things pulled out. Okay. Now, some people will email and they'll say, you know, I pump up the organ before I do anything. The thing is, you know, I pull out a couple stops and I haven't I'm not touching the keys. And I hear one of the notes or a couple of them that are sounding. Why is that? I'm not pushing the keys. In most cases, what you have is a valve, wooden valve about so long, about ½ an inch wide, has some felt and leather on it. And that sits underneath the rows of reeds. And so when you push down on a key, there's a little like a lollipop stick called a pitman, I want to get technical. It goes down and pushes against that and opens up that valve and allows the suction to come up through the reed and you have your sound. But what will happen is, on occasion, those valves slide up and down on 2 guide pins, not that tall. And if you hit the key too hard in some cases, it'll jump up and get hung up on that guide pin. And that's not good because that means you've got to really take everything apart to get down in there, to get underneath to those valve chambers. It's not a good deal. It's not a good deal. Now here's a trick. Here's a trick you might want to consider. If you have, say, A is sounding all the time, what you want to do is you got A sharp and G sharp right next to it. Push down those left and right keys pretty firm and see if that sometimes will pop that hanging valve. That's, well, as we said, like A as an example. It will drop it, it'll allow it to drop back down. Will it happen all the time? No, but it's a trick that works quite often. But again, in most cases, that's not good. If you have reeds that are sounding and you're not pushing the keyboard. Okay, let's go to. Oh, I don't have that. I can't read about that. Oh, well, I'll take a shot at it. Just a short warning about people. If you're interested in buying a pump organ, if you go to eBay, and that's where they're going to be, you do a search for pump organ, reed organ, that's where you're going to find them, 75 to 100 of them at any one time. Just don't fall for a lot of the puffery that you'll hear from the descriptions. Rare, one of a kind, and just on and on and on, these just voluminous statements about them. And none of it's true. They're not rare. They're not unusual. They're just a $100 organ. So don't get pulled into that. Some of the copy that's written is absolutely very well done. Not true, but very well done. Okay, here's a small one. The wheels, pump organs have wheels, but they only slide left and right. And the reason for that, they'll have here, roller here, and roller here, wheels. But they're designed only to go this way and that way. And the reason for that is, if you're sitting here and you're pushing down on your feet, you're pushing toward the organ, if these wheels were the kind that would go any direction, this thing would be across the room and you'd be sitting there staring at it. So that's why this will only go one way. So if you're moving it, you can move it around the room, but only left and right, not forward and back. Okay. Let me see. We've got that. We've got the wheel. Here's an interesting one. A tidbit, I don't know what, but in the popularity of pump organs, I mentioned in another video that you had families that had an organ for generations, maybe over 100 years, 150 years. And they would have this organ would play at every funeral. Well, maybe, I don't know about funerals, but every wedding. And quite often, they would take them outside. It's a beautiful June day, and they would pick the organ up. They weigh about 250 pounds, one of these fellows. And they carry them outside, set it down, and they'd have just a great time. And generation after generation, their organ has always played at their wedding. Interesting, you know, I've never known, I've never thought about funerals, but because most people were buried from their home. But that's, I found that an interesting thing. I had one, who was it, a customer in West Virginia, and they contacted me, they emailed and said, well, now I know you got a cycle time for these things, I think 8-9 months, something like that, because it goes into a queue in line for restoration because there's others ahead of you. And they said, well, could we ask a special favor, because, and they were a family that had the pump organ for a long time, and they were the ones that told me about how they had always had this pump organ. And of course, in parts of West Virginia, families stayed in that county, in that community for a very, very long time. Well, that's interesting. There's a lot of history to some of these things. And families have kept them, have a special relationship with them. Well, I think that's all we want to cover on this one and this video. So appreciate your time. I hope this has been informative. We'll have several more videos coming down the line. So again, appreciate you watching, and thank you very much. Bye now.